Well, let's go ahead and do the questions then up to this point.
Denise, can you see the question panel?
No, I cannot.
Okay, I'll read out so we have one question about the percentage. When you say 20 to 50%, do you mean that the percentage is based on the overall ask, or is there a possibility that an ask for 50% funded could only be funded at 20%?
It depends on the total budget ask and what they're asking for grant funds. So some organizations may not need the full 50% if that's what the project budget would allow. So it really kind of depends, but the percentage is based on the total project budget and the maximum grant amount that we can provide, which is $250,000.
I'll just add as well, what the ask is for will be matched if the project is approved.
Yeah, yes. So we wouldn't lower that amount.
Okay. The next question is, under facilities, can the renovation be for a new office that will be a long-term lease?
I don't see why not.
Okay. So the next question is, when you say an eligible organization, does this organization have to be the same as the applying organization? I think you're talking, yeah.
Yes.
That's right. So you couldn't have a for-profit and a not-for-profit joining together to apply for a community capital project grant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The next question is, what about repeat applicants, i.e. applicants who were successful with their applications last year? I think this is in relation to something that you were talking about at that point, but you can elaborate on.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have applied for a grant in the past, you're welcome to apply for another one in the future. One of the, after the eligibility criteria has gone through, and if everything's been met and it's gone on to the assessment stage, after all the applications are assessed and scored, there's sort of an additional lens that's put on it, and that's to help prioritize people who would be first-time applicants. So it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be in the running. It just means that we are trying to prioritize things like making sure the funding goes to all the different regions of the province for the different sectors. And another one of those considerations is for making sure that first-time applicants are able to benefit as well.
Okay, thank you. This next question is slightly longer, so I'm just going to read it out.
Sure.
Our organization has been working to construct a large pole shed type structure that will house up to 10 at-risk rail cars. Once completed, there will be a platform up the middle and a train track on either side of the platform. In addition to providing shelter to all rail cars, the space can be used as community space. Do you recommend that we apply it as a community infrastructure or facilities?
I guess it would depend on, in my view, and David, chime in if you feel differently, on how, like, the primary intention of the project. So it sounds like it may be more of about the facility itself and what that's intended to do about these rail cars, and a secondary benefit would be for being a public space.
We probably wouldn't quibble over a slight misallocation if we thought a little bit differently than the applicant between something of that nature, because that one, I could see how an organization may pick one of the two categories, and the grants department may think it would be reassessed as the other one. But so there's no real penalty. You do your best guess as to what you feel your project represents.
Yeah, and we don't have like buckets of money attached to each of the project categories. So as long as you're demonstrating the project eligibility, which facilities and community infrastructure are the same, that would be totally fine.
Thank you. The next question is, does a nonprofit animal shelter fall under any of the 6 sectors?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. We do provide funding to humane societies and animal shelters, and that is under environment. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Recalling that correctly? Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
And how many applications do you usually receive, and how many applicants are successful in a given year?
I think it's varied a little bit. I don't know exact numbers off the top of my head. I think last year it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 applications were received, and I think in total we were able to fund around 70 or 80 of those, and that was with some additional end of year funding that we were able to allocate.
Yeah, and to elaborate a bit on that, it depends on the selected projects and the value of the ask. So the more approved projects that are of smaller value in comparison, our budget will go further to meet those applicants. So we could end up with a lot of approved applications if they're of all smaller value. And if there's a mix, then the numbers can change a bit. So it's very hard to say how many organizations would get approved. It really depends on the ask, though we have an initial limit of $5 million to award.
Next one is, can volunteer hours qualify for matching funds for project?
No, they can't. We are, for matching funds, we're looking at tangible hard assets as matching funds, and unfortunately volunteer hours would not be included in that.
Right. Okay, so the first question is, could you start a project prior to getting an approval?
Yes, so you can start a project before applying, but that may impact the financial assessment. If all work is complete before your application is submitted, then the project would not be eligible. And then the other thing I'll add to that is that funds can only be used to reimburse costs after the application has been submitted. So if work had started, anything that was incurred before the application was submitted, we wouldn't be able to cover those costs.
Okay, the second question is, in acquisitions, can you include renovations that are required by building acquisition?
I think that would just fall under the facilities category, because the acquisition is just about, strictly acquiring something.
Right. Okay. The next question is, what if an organization has basically been closed since March 2020 due to COVID? Would you consider previous year's financial information?
I think that they're like they would likely still have financial documentation that they would prepare, even if not much was going on. But if you like, you can submit a previous years if you want to give us a true sense of what that looks like in a, we'll call it a normal year.
Yeah, that might make things a bit more sense, but still, we're looking for financial capacity to meet the project.
Next question. Does the requirement for length of current lease change depending on the ask for the capital grant?
No, it doesn't. It still needs to be 10 years.
Or more.
Or more, yes, at least 10 years.
Okay. Are you able to apply for funding towards the purchase of land and buildings, say for a recovery program?
I believe so. I know with the acquisition or the facilities, you can use it to purchase land. I think if there's another part of the project that you're going to be building something and doing something on that land, it can go toward the purchase. Am I correct in that, David?
I think it's more the building is what we're looking for. The hard, I shouldn't say hard, but those are the type of assets that we're looking to purchase. So it's a combination. If it was bare land, probably not, because what's the purpose for that land? Whereas if there's a land building combination purchase, then it's more likely to be meet the requirements that we're talking about for program delivery and accessibility to the public and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David. When would approvals generally be provided by?
We will be informing the recipients by the fall. Is that what they are asking, or are they asking something different?
I think so. I think yeah. The next question is about membership. Our board of directors are our own members, thus we would not be eligible based on the membership being at least twice as big as the board. Why is this an eligibility requirement? Our organization would fit very well in all other requirements.
So like our community gaming grant program, the whole intention and purpose is that the organizations are providing programming and services to a broad general public. So if the board members were the only members, then that's not demonstrating that community benefit in the same way that an organization with robust membership and is able to demonstrate that others in the community are involved in the organization's affairs and programming.
I might ask a question back if possible. How big is the board? Generally, boards can run as small as 3 people effectively. So that would mean you would just need 10 members, including the board members.
Yeah, I think that's the message that also we try to give, because you're not asking for a huge number of members, right? It's just demonstrating that there are other people involved in the organization.
Yes, we'd like to make sure that the organization has representation from the public and that there's a vigorous discourse on the actions that organization will take, so that that's how we know that there isn't a groupthink happening, that there is some vigorous thought and consultation amongst the members as to where that organization should be heading and how they're going to do the things that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, David. Next question. Our cat rescue shelter has a 5-year lease with our sponsoring vet hospital. We have had this arrangement for 15+ years, but in 5-year renewals, not 10-year. Are we still eligible?
Yeah, I think what we've done in situations like this is we ask for a signed commitment letter between the organization and the entity that's leasing the space. So they may have a 5-year term in place right now, but if they're able to have a conversation and say, you know, look, it's our intention to be here for the long haul, would you sign a commitment letter that would state, you know, when the lease is up, you know, in good faith that it will be renewed. That sort of documentation would be great to include with the application.
Okay. Does the start of a project include design and planning phase, or just the construction phase?
I would think it would include all of those things, as those are costs that go toward the entire project budget.
Do support letters from stakeholders help with total scoring?
I don't actually, I might ask David that question. I don't think it plays into the scoring so much. It's still in what's in the application, but letters of support help to demonstrate that community benefit for sure.
Yes, so it's more on the subjective side, but having those letters of support from either municipal leaders or provincial leaders or business leaders to help bolster that that our organization has that capacity and backing from the community to go and do whatever that capital project is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Could a grant cover part of a down payment for a building acquisition?
I think that may have been something in the past that has been done. David, maybe I'll.
Well, let's go back to the big question: what's the purchase price of that building? So if the building is selling for more than 1.25 million, it wouldn't be eligible. So a down payment could be used for purchasing a building, but we also want to see matching funds.
If under facilities, say we are leasing a new space long term, and some space will be for services while others will be offices or admin, not open to the public but help run the community programs, do we have to consider this in our ask?
I think that, it's reasonable for lots of organizations that program and sort of operational space is shared. So I think it would be kind of one and the same. I don't know if you have a different view on that, David?
No, it's all part of that acquisition or that capital project, and office space is necessary for program delivery. So I don't see a problem there.
Okay, I have another question about the lease period. So I think that has been answered. It's 10 years versus the 10 years versus the 5 years. So we'll move on to the next one. Is a church applying to create a community hub eligible?
I don't think churches would be eligible. I don't know what happened to my screen just then. Hopefully you can all still hear me. Yeah, David, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. A religious organization in and of itself could not apply for a community gaming grant because they're not structured in the manner for community, like to meet the requirements of the community gaming grant.
Right.
Okay. What is the average amount of approved grants?
I assume that may mean the funding amount, but like David said, it depends on the project. I don't think we've even tried to come up with an average amount because it wouldn't be meaningful information. It really depends on the total project budget, and again, how much does that organization need to complete the project.
I could say, what might help some of the audience members, anywhere from about 2 to 6 organizations get 250,000 a year based off of our past experience, and then everyone else is getting less than that.
Okay. We are being renovated with the ability to exercise the right to return to renovate. Okay. Okay, so this related to the previous one of the previous questions. This is from Benita. Benita, maybe if you click your hand raised, I can unmute you later when we've answered all the questions so that you can perhaps expand on what you still want to ask. The next question is, how many quotes do we need to submit for a project?
Yeah, so we don't have like a specific number except to say more than one. And if there is only one provider that can fulfill whatever the project is, then we would ask for an explanation of why that was the case.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. If an outdoor enhancement project to outdoor school playground as a facilities project also fall under environment, since learning has focused on surrounding ecosystem?
There could be a few things at play. The word school was mentioned. So what I would say for that, we do have this in our guidelines, but there is a program through the Ministry of Education called the Ministry of Education Playground Equipment Program. And what we say is that if there are projects that are eligible for that program, it is not eligible through the Capital Project Grant Program. And what I know about that program is that school districts put forward recommendations for playground projects every year. I think it happens in June. So they put forward a list of priorities, And then playgrounds are funded based on their greatest need and priorities given to schools where there isn't a playground, or where schools where there's an existing playground but it's aging. So if this was on school property and related to schools, if the project isn't eligible for that process, then the applicant could explain why that was the case in the application.
Okay, the next question is, our renovation requires that we move to another site temporarily. Can the incremental cost of moving to the temporary site be included in the project budget?
I don't think I've encountered that before. I'm not sure if you have, David.
No, it's a new one. Probably would be included.
Okay, that's good to know. This question I don't think you can answer, but is December a good time to start renovations?
I don't think we would be able to say.
Yeah, sorry about that.
we can't, it's beyond our scope. We have no expertise in that area.
Yeah. Right. Okay, to clarify, funding can cover 20 to 50% of a project budget, unless that project is related to COVID-19, in which case there is a 20% limit. There are actually a few questions around the percentage still, so
sure,
maybe a little bit more of clarification again on this front.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the percentage of what the capital project funding can cover, it varies just because of the maximum grant amount, which, as I mentioned, is $250,000. But if your project is in excess of $500,000, then that would mean that basically the 50% matched funds, it's only going to cover a project that is up to $500,000. If your project is more than $500,000, then the percentage that the capital project grant could cover is going to decrease depending on the size of that project. Hopefully that makes sense. And so that's for how that normally works. For COVID-19 related projects, we've switched that to the capital project grant being able to cover up to 80%. So we were able to cover more of a project, and still up to that maximum total amount of 1.25 million, we would be able to cover more. But again, the cap for us is always at $250,000 max.
Okay, is there an accessible Word version of the application for folks who are blind? The current website application is not compatible with a screen reader.
We just looked into this recently. Unfortunately, the online application is not accessible. We are working with a system that is quite long in the tooth and was not built with our current accessibility standards in place. However, there are a few different options that individuals or organizations can pursue. So if there isn't somebody who's able to assist, a volunteer or a staff member who's able to use the online application, there's two options. So we are working with Service BC, which is around the province, and they are aware of our program and have had training. So they can help someone complete the application in a Service BC location. So that's one option. The other would be to connect if there's a community charitable gaming association in your area. You could reach out to them and see if you might be able to work together to complete the application. And then if there isn't, I would say maybe the BCACG could assist as well. Or you can get in touch with us, and we have been able to help folks over the phone to do applications. Previously, we just need to figure out the whole documentation piece as part of things. So there's a few different options, but if the question asker, or if this is relevant to other folks and you want more information, please get in touch with us and we'll do our best to assist.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The next question is, I understand volunteer hours are not considered matching funds, but are machine hours, etc.?
I don't think I know what machine hours would be referencing. I'm not 100%
Well,
on
I
that
think
one.
perhaps to answer a more global version of this question is because for the community gaming grant, you can have in-kind contributions in the budget. So I think perhaps you can explain whether in-kind contribution can be counted as a matching portion.
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, so first of all, in the project budget, you could include all sorts of tangible and intangible in-kind contributions to your project to give that full scope of what the project budget really is. But things that we would consider intangible or things like land would not be considered matching funds. So we're really just talking about things that we can ascribe a fair market value to that are hard tangible assets. So things like donated equipment and materials, and that would be backed up with documentation, things like invoices or promissory letters that would assess the fair market value of those donated equipment or materials.
Thanks. Okay, this might be an odd question related actually to the online application. How do I edit the organization details? I need to add our CRA registered charity number.
I think when you first go through the application system and you find your organization, I think there's a box that asks if there's been any changes to your organization, and you should be able to put it in there.
Yeah, I think maybe just to clarify, you can't actually access the field to edit, but you can put what you want to change in the box, right? In the
That's
text
right.
box. Yeah.
Yep.
This is again for on the question of lease. If you have a 5-year lease, can you still qualify if the grant ask is on the lower end? I think that's a similar question to the previous one. That you need a letter of commitment of some sort.
Yeah, everyone has the same requirements regardless of the ask in funding.
I'll jump in here. Many leases do say something like 5+5 as the language in the lease agreement, which the meaning that after the first 5 years, there's usually an opportunity for both parties to accept an extension of the lease. That would also count as going towards the 10 years.
Right, thanks, David. That's good to know. Okay, for projects already started, eligible costs are those after the application is submitted or approved. That is a yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this next one is our current year budget will end before our proposed project starts. Do we need to also include next year's budget to show the project impact, or do we just provide a detailed budget for the project itself?
I mean, what we ask for at the time of application is what we would call the current budget, which would be the current fiscal year that the organization is in. Where it's kind of a timing issue, and if that project was going forward, it's actually going to be in their next fiscal year, which is not happening too far away. I would suggest that they include the budget for that fiscal year.
I think Denise audio seems to have cut out.
Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can now. Thank you.
All right. Did you catch my whole last answer there?
Maybe you can just recap just the gist of it a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think we lost a little bit of that.
Okay, so typically, like when we ask for the timing in the application, we ask for the current current budget, which when we talk about current, that would be the fiscal year that you are currently in. If your fiscal year is about to end and the project will be taking place in what will be your next fiscal year, but even though that may be a month or two away, then you would likely show that budget reflecting that time period. I think that would make more sense than a budget that's about to kind of become obsolete.
Mm-hmm. The next one is about the question is, was there no consideration to increase the overall project cost due to the fact that building costs have increased substantially in the past year?
I mean, yeah.
On this one, this is where the risk management plan that the entity, the applicant is putting together with the application should cover off those risks. And so we're looking for them to demonstrate they have the financial capacity to absorb those costs in their planning. And so, the maximum grant we can provide is $250,000. There isn't going to be any more money for an individual grant on a capital project. So the rising costs have to be considered by the applicant as a risk in their project application. Now, Denise, I don't know if you had another point you might want to bring in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we only have $5 million for this program, and it is quite oversubscribed. So we can only do what we can do with our money, and to make sure that it goes to as many people as possible. So any increases in what we provide to one organization means that there may be another project that doesn't get funded. So that's why our program is structured the way that it is, so that we're able to help see things through to completion, but that we're able to support a number of different projects.
Okay, the next question has actually been asked by quite a few people. Can cost of permits or land survey be included as they need to be done prior? I also have a few people asking me a question about the fact that in order to be able to show that they have permits and approvals, they will have to do the feasibility studies and the rest of the work before they submit the applications, and they're wondering, because that sometimes can cost quite a bit, but if they cannot get those reimbursed within the grant. So that is the general question that is in various formats.
Sure. So there's kind of there's two approaches to this. One is that you could apply for a project not having started any of those things, and all of those things would likely be risks to your project, because one of those things, you don't get a permit, or the land survey says that the project isn't viable. Those would be all risks to the project that would be something you would need to outline, and certainly there could be a risk mitigation plan in place, but alongside another project that's gone through that process and has shown green lights all the way through, and they're bringing us something shovel ready. You can kind of imagine where the assessment would be higher for that shovel ready project versus the one that kind of has a lot of question marks. And so that's one approach to applying for the grant. And then in that case, you would be able to cover some of those costs if it were approved. The other option, or the other way to go, would be that you kind of have to do this stuff ahead of time to make sure that the project can go ahead, and you're using some of your project funding to be able to do that. But what you're coming to the table with is an application that's really strong because you've done all of those pieces. It does mean, however, that if you are doing those before you apply, you cannot use your capital project grant funding for that purpose, because that money's already been spent. So that's kind of my advice with things like that. I don't know if David, if you have anything else to add.
Just maybe clarify a little bit, and then so let's say you did those costs, you got your project approved, well, you still can use the grant monies going forward, right? And yes, matching that against all your future expenses related to that project.
Yeah.
The next question is, can you be more precise than late for approval?
Late, no.
Well, I can make a little joke. I mean, about it being, probably after October and before December 31st. But we cannot be more precise than that at this time.
The next question is about the Gaza. As a community grant, gaming grant recipient, how can I confirm if I need to submit a Gaza prior to applying for a capital grant?
If your records, your own personal records, you can't figure out whether or not it's been submitted or not, you can get in touch with us to ask.
I think that might be relating to like if people are in between years and they have submitted the last one, but not the one that is coming due. But in the middle, they have to apply for the capital grant. So would you want them
if
to have?
If it's not due yet, then we would, the one that they'd recently submitted, if their fiscal year is not over or that 90 days isn't lapsed, if they're not considered late, then they're all good.
Right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. We are in a publicly owned building. Do we still need a 10-year lease?
Yes.
But I think I can see a little bit with this one based off the name of the organization. Sometimes municipalities don't want to provide those 10-year leases or 5+5 because municipalities are such a long-term organization within society. If the city were to provide, the municipality were to provide those letters of assurances and the reasons for that assurance going into beyond 5 years for like renewals of that lease, that could be accepted and has been accepted in the past as well.
Okay, thanks. The next one is, does the expansion of the province playground equipment program PEP affect the chances of a playground at public school funded by a PAC to be awarded a capital grant?
I'm not aware of anything about the expansion of that program. I think our take is the same as it was before. If your playground project is not eligible under the Ministry of Education's program, you can let us know why that's the case in your application.
Okay, thanks, Denise. This is again about the matching fund. To confirm, we don't need to show 100% of the funds. We just need to show the percentage we are required to meet. For example, the project is 60,000. We are applying under COVID section. We are required to have matching funds of 20%. We have to show we have 12,000.
Yes, that math sounds right to me.
Okay, thank you. The next question. The bulk of our expenses will be incurred prior to receiving funding. However, we have borrowed funds to expedite the project. Can funding be used to repay our loan, which was provided by a nonprofit organization, a school district?
I might let you take this one, David. I don't think so.
Okay, actually, I want to go back to the last one, if you don't mind, for a moment. So this is back to the $60,000 question and the 12%. So I'm a bit curious as to where the other monies are coming from for that. It's a COVID one. Okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah.
I'm catching up. I'm a little slow. All right, so let me get back to the current one. The bulk of our expenses will be incurred prior to receiving funding. Bulk of our expenses. However, we have borrowed funds to expedite the project. Can funding be used to repay our loan, which was provided by a nonprofit org? This is getting a little bit complicated in that it almost sounds like this project is doable without a community capital project grant. So this one could hit at the heart of what we're trying to do here with the capital projects. We're trying to help those not-for-profits that are unable to get that last yard to get that to make a successful project, that they've been fundraising and holding galas and collecting donations for years, and they've got an X amount of dollars, but they've kind of reached that brick wall where they can't get the final bit of money to get that project that would be of value to the community, those are the projects that are really the ones that are scoring high when they do everything else properly with the application, because we can really help them with the funding that we have available. Those organizations that can access funding without coming to a community gaming grants, those ones are not as strong in the sense of that the community is already demonstrated that they're fully behind it. That organization has the financial capacity to get things done without a community gaming grant capital project. So I'm not trying to dissuade people from applying at all, but it sounds like this particular project might actually be very close to completion, and I would assume that the organization, and it sounds like they have the capacity to get the funding to complete it. So I'm thinking this one is a little bit trickier and probably might have a harder time scoring high for a capital project grant.
Mm-hmm. David, I think the issue here is because they the funding they have right now is borrowed funds, so they will have to repay them. Whereas if they get part of the grant, the grant, like the capital grant part, they don't need to repay, right? It would be,
yeah. So yeah. I mean, just reading that part, I'm going to say that no, that this wouldn't be, because they've got this project covered from the sounds of it.
Okay, so we will move to the next question. This is again about how many quotes you need, and the participant is saying that sorry if he's or she has missed it at the beginning.
The number of quotes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all we say on that is that we would like to see more than one. If there are several, that's great. If there is only one, we would like to see the reason why. Maybe there's only one contractor who's able to do the work, or there's only one, say it's an acquisition, only one item that exists that is applicable, and you could describe why that was the case. Otherwise, we do require more than one quote.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a church question. We are a church, but run the town food bank. Would we be able to apply?
No, again, as they're not a not-for-profit organization, in the way that we are talking about not-for-profits, they would not be an eligible organization.
Okay, the next one is, can we have grants from other organizations as part of our financing? I think they mean the matching funds, perhaps.
Yep. Yes, that yes. Other grants can count as matched funds.
Okay. Okay, this is another in-kind question. Does in-kind count towards the 50% match funding?
So like I said before, those sort of intangible in-kind items can be included with your project budget to show the project cost, but they are not considered matched funds unless they are donated equipment or materials that have documentation that shows the fair market value.
Okay. The next one is, can we have more than one funding source, for example, gaming and Canadian heritage infrastructure grant for the same capital project?
Yes, you can have several different types of funding that make up your total matched funds.
This is another matching fund question. Can matching funds be taken from our organization's operating budget, or do we need to secure outside funding, for example, fundraising, other grants, sponsorship? I think it's whichever way, but you have to show that you have the funding, right?
Yes, for sure. And if in our guidelines, there's kind of the different scenarios. So if you are an organization and you may have restricted funds for that purpose, and we would require to see, when the board had restricted the funds, and that would be showing up on the financial statements. If the funding is unrestricted, so it's just cash sitting in a bank account. We would, again, we want to see that in the financial statements, and that there would be an explanation that that funding was intended to be used as matched funds for the project.
I'll add that restricting the funds, board restricting the funds for the purpose of the project is a stronger application than unrestricted funds sitting in the operating account. Both are acceptable, but one is a stronger statement of intent and capacity than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's very good to know. Thanks, David. The next question is, what about childcare renovations, which may be eligible under New Spaces Fund? The New Spaces Fund is closed, but expected to reopen later this year.
Yeah, we have funded renovations to childcare facilities, so I don't see how that other program would impact ours. If they want to apply under the capital project grant, then they can do so, assuming that they meet all the other eligibility criteria.
The next question is about the application again. Are you able to send a version of the application in Word?
No, it has to be done through the online system.
I think maybe a different version of the question is there an example of the entire application that people can download just to see what questions they will be asked beforehand? Yeah.
Yep, so that's all in the application tutorial. It has screenshots of all the different sections of the application.
Okay, the next one is quite a long one, so I'll read it out, or David, if you can see it, you can read it as well.
I'm sorry, I still can't see. I just one line, no matter what I try.
Yeah, no problem. I can read. This question is, hello, I've been putting together an application for the capital grant for gift shop renovation at my museum. I'm working down the checklist in the program provided online. I have some question about the checklist and the type of responses I'll be creating for renovations. How in-depth of a response do I need to provide when addressing ongoing operational viability of the project? I'm not sure how to discuss this information in detail because it is only a renovation project. Would it best to discuss future or long-term plans for the museum in general?
This is specific to the operational viability section?
Yeah, the question on the ongoing operational viability of the project.
Yeah, so that is really about the future orientation of, so they've done this renovation, how are they going to make sure that what they have invested in is going to continue functioning, and any sort of like maintenance costs or anything that kind of needs to be thought about to protect that asset, we'll call it.
So the branch is just worried that, and this is probably more intended for purchases of new things. This sounds like it's a space within a rental space, but a new building or a new piece of equipment, just buying that equipment or just building that new facility isn't the end of the story for the asset. There may be taxes to pay, ongoing taxes to pay. There may be operating costs, oil changes and things of that nature. Now, wear and tear. How is an organization able to meet that? Is the ongoing operational viability aim of that question. This particular scenario, it sounds to me a bit more like perhaps they've had a long-term lease with in the place. They have many more years to go on their current lease. They can demonstrate that their past budgets have been accurate and their future budgets look rosy in terms of being able to pay the rent and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So
sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, just lastly is that the branch just wants to ensure that once the grant monies have been provided and the project has been completed, that not through lack of funds will that particular project or asset become non-functional, non-available to the community. So the assurance that you can provide to the grant analyst that you do have the capacity to maintain those costs or meet those costs is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and on the question about length, I don't think there's a specific answer. Kind of like David was saying, it's really going to depend on your project, and some things by their nature are going to require, you know, quite a bit of explanation of how that project will be cared for and maintained. Others maybe less so. So, you know, just think about it in the scope of what we've talked about and what information that you can provide to demonstrate that.
In fact, I'm going to expand a little bit more. For those of you that are already applicants for the regular grant, the community gaming grant, you'll have noticed by now that we don't provide funding for facilities. So we only provide funding for direct costs, direct programming costs. We don't provide funding for the buildings per se themselves.
Okay, thanks, David. This next one, I'm not quite sure what actually the question is, so you guys might need to help me out. Can one organization apply for sports licensing and acquisition, I presume, grant for a one-time special project?
I mean, all of the projects are one-time projects.
Yeah.
I don't know what sport licensing as an acquisition would look like. Based on my maybe cursory understanding is that I don't know if that would be an eligible project. I don't know if a sport licensing would be something, you know, you can hold in your hand. Like that's what we're talking about when we're talking about acquisitions. We're talking about tangible things you can touch and feel and see that you're purchasing for your organization. So I don't know if that meets that criteria.
David, do you have any
I'm not sure if they're asking about a gaming license to have.
Yeah, that was
events.
what I was, yeah.
So there's no connection between the gaming license today and the community gaming grants program, other than we share that gaming account summary report form for reporting.
Okay. The next question is, a portion of our matching funds is a loan from a financial institution with the debt servicing covered by an annual grant from the regional district, which is preparing a contribution agreement to cover a 10-year period. So funds are committed to be provided over 10 years annually. Still acceptable to demonstrate matching funds?
Yeah, so matched funds as loans are acceptable as matched funds, and you know the organization has their own plans in place of how they will service that loan. Then that sounds good to me. I don't, David, looked like you were going to say something.
A portion of our matching funds is a loan from financial institution, preparing contribution to cover a 10-year period. So funds are committed to be provided over 10 years. Is that the repayment of the loan, or is the loan broken up into 10-year payments? Yeah, I'm a little vague there. So the core part is loans can be used for matching, and projects must be completed within 3 years of receiving the capital project grant. So if those elements are being met with this question, then we're good. But if it's, I can't absolutely know what they're saying in this particular case. So if the funds are being provided over 10 years in 10 equal annual installments, then I don't know how the project would get completed in 3 years is kind of where I'm heading, but I might be a bit off base.
Yeah, I understood it as they'll have a grant to service that loan, but that the funds will be given upfront as matched funds. And if that were the case, I think that sounds fine.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Also, is it best to have the risk management plan done by the contractor who is completing the renovations?
They can certainly be a part of it, but there may be stuff that falls outside of that, beyond just the contractor's part or the contractor's role in the project. So I would definitely engage with them and see anything they may have to add, but there could be more than that.
Okay. Just to clarify, we can start spending on the project once we have submitted our application, and BC Gaming would provide funds retroactively if we were successful with our application.
That's right. Yes, you could reimburse for those costs.
All right. If you request 250,000 grant, is it less likely of a probability of award because it's a larger application compared to a smaller grant? Is it all or nothing? Or if we request 250,000, can the capital grants be adjusted to a lower amount and then we reduce our facility renovation scope?
It is all or nothing. So it's based on the total project budget and then the amount that you're requesting from us. So if you had more than what you need, then you don't need to ask for that $250,000 maximum if you get by without less. There isn't really an assessment in terms of, we only provide a certain number of $250,000 grants. If that's what it costs for your project, that's what it costs. And while the matched funds and the grant amount ask is part of the assessment process, it doesn't mean that that project would be less likely to receive funding. So bottom line, ask for what you need. If you're able to show that your project budget is as such and you require a certain amount of money to complete that, then if you are successful, you will get what you've asked for.
Okay. Okay, the next one is, sorry, I wanted to know, okay, this one is, wanted to clarify whether the eligible costs were after the application was submitted or after it has been approved. I think it's after you've submitted the, yeah.
Yes.
So it is after submission.
Yes.
We're opening a new daycare and we're wondering if daycare furnishings are eligible.
Well, as I guess a suite of acquisitions, if you need furnishing for a space, I can see how that could fall under that category. Does that sound about right to you, David?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is again about whether eligible cost is like after submission or approval. So I think we've covered that question. I had asked the question about supporting a down payment. Are you saying that we would have to be able to purchase the building outright? Could we instead ask for matching funds necessary to secure a mortgage? For example, 15% of the necessary 30%. So for a 500,000 purchase.
Sorry, Kalina, I think you cut out a little bit there. But maybe, David, can you see the question?
Yeah, I can see the question. I'm being very careful because I don't want to, provide an incorrect answer. So I had asked the question about supporting a down payment, or are you saying that we would have to be able to purchase the building outright? Could we instead ask for matching funds necessary to secure a mortgage? For example, 15% of the necessary 30%. So for 500,000, 75,000. So I'm getting a bit convoluted. So if the purchase price of the building is $1 million and you are able to secure financing for it, we can match that financing. So whether it would go to the down payment on the house or for the total purchase, I'm a little bit unsure here.
Well,
I
think
they can get, the 50% from the bank as the mortgage for the loan, and they need the other half from us, then they would have the total to make the purchase.
Right.
Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it doesn't, I think the question was if they needed to purchase it outright or whether they could fund a mortgage, essentially.
I mean, that's the choice, right? The organization has to make. If they can buy the building without a community capital project grant, the question may be, well, why do you need a capital project grant? I think that would need to be explained. But loans are certainly matching funds when secured.
Okay. This is again the question about moving into a temporary space while our current site will be renovated late 2022 to early 2023. Would we need to provide a projected budget into 2023?
For your project budget, your project, so the organization's financial eligibility is different than the project budget. So the project budget, if you're going to be asking for those costs to be included, and it is going to go, 2 or 3 years into the future, that project budget should be including all of the things that would look like.
Okay. Do provincial sports organization qualified as an applicant for equipment purchase?
Yeah, so we have funded sports equipment under the acquisition category for organizations.
Okay, the next question is about feasibility study funding. So like our organization has already acquired a feasibility study and the engineered design drawings using other grant opportunities in 2020. Are those expenses be included within project cost for this capital grant application, or do we consider those costs outside of this application?
Correct me if I'm wrong, David. I think they would be considered outside of the project cost because we're just talking about the project that they're requesting funding for, which wouldn't include that.
Yeah, and by its nature, the word feasibility indicates that it may not be feasible. So we would not provide funds for something like that.
No, I think what they're asking is whether they would include the cost of that in the total project budget.
Yeah,
and
no.
Then,
no,
yeah, so that's already happened. We're talking about what is it going to cost to get this project completed as of the date you apply.
Right.
Okay. This is, sorry if you answered this already, but if the total budget is, for example, 100,000 and an organization spends 20,000 before the grant is awarded, does that mean only 80,000 will be included in the budget submitted in the proposal? Do we make assumptions about how much we think we will spend before the grant is received?
I'm wondering if the answer we just provided answers this question, where if they've spent the money before they've applied, they don't need to include that as part of their project budget. So then what they would be showing is, what's it going to cost to complete it, and then how much do they need from us to be able to complete the project.
Just to clarify on the lease questions, we should have 10 plus years remaining on the lease or just hold a 10 plus year lease? I'm asking because we are 15 years through a 20-year lease.
Yeah, so they would need to have at least 10 years plus remaining. So in that case, if they were able to get a signed commitment letter with whoever they're holding that lease with, that they intend on renewing for another, at least 5 years in this case, plus to fulfill that 10-year plus commitment.
This is the board member question, David. If you have 5 board members, how many regular members do you need to qualify?
Including the board members, you would need 11.
Right. So you need an additional 6, basically, right?
Six
Yeah.
members. 6 members who are not board members.
Not board members. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. For an IT investment to replace or upgrade an organization's website, what costs are eligible? For example, design, software licensing, hardware migration, content revision. I think it would be just really the hardware pieces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that's adequate for this question. Are quotes needed only for acquisitions or for every item in our budget for a community infrastructure grant?
Or for everything, whether like doesn't matter the project category, where we want quotes for every project.
Mm-hmm. Will this same program be offered next year in case we can't get it together to apply this year?
I mean, we certainly hope so. David and I we don't get paid enough money to make these kinds of decisions, but I would assume status quo that it'll be here next year as it has been in years prior.
Okay, the next, David, do you have any comments on that, or?
No, it's up to the Minister of Finance with each year's tabled budget, but we've been here. This is year number 5 with the capital projects, and community gaming grants has been around for, in some shape or form, for about 20 years now.
Right. Our fiscal doesn't link up with the grant timelines. We expect the matching funds to be raised from September to June, with project built July and August. This doesn't fit cash in hand desired. Would we still be considered?
So if they're planning on doing their fundraising up until June when they apply, is that right? So they would raise the funds before June? Did I hear that right?
I think they're talking about next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
September 2021 to June 2022.
Right. Yeah. So that I think would be a good candidate for next year, because if you don't have the matching funds right now, you wouldn't be able to apply in this intake. So for future planning purposes, if you do raise those matching funds next year before you apply, you would have, you'd either be able to show, if depending on your fiscal year, you may be able to restrict those funds, or you may have them in just your general operating account, and you'd be able to demonstrate that they were there at the time of application and they're intended for the project.
Mm-hmm. David, I'm going to jump across to the next question about the social enterprise, because jumping off the gift shop question, are social enterprise projects like that?
That's actually a good point. I saw that and I was like, oh yeah. That was, so so technically no, we're not funding operations that are out there to generate funds.
Right. Just to be clear, when David, so this is for you, when David said gaming not paying for facilities, does that apply to leasing or rent cost, or just buildings that are owned?
So it's, I think I was referring to the operating. Is that what?
Yeah, I think you were talking about community gaming grants program, not the
That's
capital.
right.
Yeah.
So no, rents, paying rent is a eligible expense for community gaming grants purposes.
Yeah, and I think that applies to the next question. Do you think, David, asking about a building would not be covered only the services it provides?
So
this sounds like a gaming.
Yeah, so it sounds like a gaming grant question. So yes, we fund direct program delivery. We don't provide funds just to maintain and operate buildings under the regular grant.
The next question is, we have been putting money away in a restricted funds account since our lease for the existing facility is coming up in 2 years. For how long can we hold the funds in restricted funding without adversely affecting our regular gaming grant application?
So for that one, correct me if I'm wrong, David, I think it's 5 years for like capital projects like buildings and things like that.
Yes, and this applicant could also, as that time frame comes up, they could just remind the grant analyst that that's what the restricted funds are for and the anticipated usage date.
Okay. Do you get more points if you're coming together with another not-for-profits working in the same sector to come together and provide services in a new renovated space, as long as there's one lead?
I don't know if that would be scored any more favorably necessarily. I think, you know, what that could show, where, you know, that could be an advantage, would be in, you know, the community benefit coming together, and, you know, we're kind of working together to make a project happen. It may also be an advantage just in the strict sense of you may have two organizations who are able to pool their sort of matched funds together. So it wouldn't be sort of by design that they would have an advantage, but I could see how it may be advantageous for the two organizations to work together just in terms of, you know, the components on the application. But you know, an organization that was just a sole sort of entity could also be able to demonstrate those exact same things. So short answer is no, not necessarily that they would have an advantage.
Do matching funds need to be confirmed and in hand, or can they be planned and pending, for example, future fundraiser, etc.? I think the answer is it has to be in hand, right?
Yeah, in hand, or there's a bona fide commitment. So plans to fundraise would not be a bona fide commitment.
A bona fide commitment, though, for example, would be a pending grant from the federal government. So some federal grants, government grants, are dependent on acquiring other grants. So it could be a bit of a chicken versus egg situation, but because the federal government is a reliable partner, a reliable supplier of funds, that would be acceptable as a bona fide commitment.
Okay. It's incredibly hard to get folks out to quote these days on renovations. If we are unable to get 2 quotes, does that disqualify us?
I don't know that challenges getting someone to quote would be a good reason for not having more than one quote. What we're looking for when there's only one quote is that, like, there's no one else who's able to do this. So I would say, you know, do your best endeavor, because yes, if you don't have quotes, you would not be eligible for a grant.
Okay. How would you know if a pending federal grant will come through? I think this is for David.
Well, hopefully, generally, the examples I have seen to date have been very clear in the commitment letter from the federal government department, saying if you are able to so and so, we will then provide X amount of dollars on this date or by this date. It's usually quite clear that that's how we know it would come through.
And so at this point, I would just like to thank Denise and David for staying the 2 hours and helping us with all the questions and everything. And as Denise says, if you have questions, we may host another Q&A session, but if not, you're always welcome to contact the branch or contact BCACG, and there will be somebody to help you with your application. Denise and David, do you have any parting comments or?
No, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for spending their afternoon listening to us talk. Hopefully we answered your questions, but as Kalina said, if there are follow-ups or maybe you felt your situation was really unique and you wanted to just chat with us individually, we're happy to do that.
I'll echo that too.
Okay, so thank you everyone, and thank you David and Denise, and hope everybody have an enjoyable rest of the day.
Thank you very much. It was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you.